OB-GYNs of Reddit. What's the most mind-blowing thing a husband or boyfriend has said? I'm not an OB but work at a L&D hospital. In a note for our patient, there was one from a previous office visit that said chief complaint. Husband concerned about wife's weight gain during pregnancy. She was actually under the weight she needed to be at during that time. My mom was a general practitioner. She once had a 15-year-old girl come in who had a pregnancy test show positive but was adamant she couldn't be pregnant. My mom confirmed the pregnancy but the girl still refused to believe it was true. She went on to explain to my mom it was impossible for her to get pregnant because her boyfriend had told her that if she laid completely still during sex then she wasn't sexually active and couldn't get pregnant. I'm a nurse and helped deliver this girl's first baby. I was still in school at the time. She was like 19 I think. The father, who was obviously much older, was also in the room. After baby was born everyone was all excited and emotional, except for the father, who was just like and shrugged it off. I can understand not wanting kids, but not giving a crap about them once you do have one is mind-boggling to me. Frick absent parents. My mother is an OB-GYN. She did a manual vaginal exam for a woman and the husband asked her, with an angry tone of voice, if there was any other way of doing the exam besides her using her fingers, because he didn't like her putting her fingers in his wife. She should have said that she was doing the exam digitally. Seeing mom back in the office for her 2-week follow-up after delivery to remove stitches. She had a tear that needed repair, only to find out the stitches were gone. Turns out hubby took them out because they were bothering him during sex. This is only the first comment I've read in this thread, and I think I'm already done. Work and I am but a patient's partner not wanting us to reveal an HIV diagnosis to a patient was definitely a low point for me, though where I work it's probably a stretch to even call that surprising. Back in my days, a young teenage patient came in with pregnancy type symptoms. Of course pregnancy test was positive, and appeared utterly shocked she was pregnant. I asked her if she was sexually active. Yes. Do you use condoms? Number. BC. Number. Still she seemed surprised this had happened. You can't get pregnant the first time. My boyfriend loves me and won't get me pregnant. It was just the tip he pulled out. A nurse here had a 19-year-old woman come in for abdominal pain. She had 2 kids and was pregnant again. She said she was not happy to be pregnant again but she didn't want to break up with her boyfriend. I thought the BF may have been abusive or not letting her use birth control or something so I closed the door and asked her some questions. Turned out she didn't know sex caused babies. Her sex ed consisted of get boyfriend married and the babies arrive with no other details. So she thought once you had a boyfriend, babies were automatic and sex was just a fun thing to do. We had a long talk. Crap, that is sad. Not an OB, but when I was in med school I was seeing a pregnant teen who was convinced she couldn't be pregnant. I asked if she was sexually active and she said yes. And I asked if she used any type of contraception and she said no. However, she said that her BF told her he couldn't get her pregnant because he got kicked in the balls a lot. And once more coming up I guess, and the old saying once more with feeling as she landed a kick fair and square. He complimented my surgical ability, stating that he had been to many strip clubs, and he has never seen such a beautiful C-section scar. Not an OB but I work in an ER and we had a 22-year-old woman come in a while back. I asked her what she was here for and she said I found a hole. Like an abscess? I found a hole. Okay, is it a wound? Does it hurt? No, it's just a hole. It's a black hole. I 100% didn't understand what she was talking about and knew that I wouldn't get any more info from her at the check-in desk. So I gave her the bracelet and sent her to the triage nurse, who had the same conversation with her. She couldn't specify anything beyond look. It's just a hole. It was her vagina. Black children are pretty light-skinned when they are born. A maternity nurse told me that some fathers immediately suspect that the mom has been unfaithful when they see a child with a far lighter complexion. Definitely gave a story to the nurse who was taking care of my wife and I after our second. Having been going through labor all day, only being on liquids and not giving birth till almost 9 at night. We were relaxing, relative term, with the nurse while holding the baby when I turned to ask the nurse a question. She pauses, turns away, turns back to me and responds back with, Not anytime soon. Disappointed, I try to push for more specifics. Because I had casually asked when can my wife have snacks, and that was a pretty nondescript answer for somebody who hadn't eaten in 12 hours. Turns out, though I was asking when can my wife have sex. After a good laugh, the correct answer was a couple of hours. I can't imagine what was going through her head before the clarification. Bless you for looking after her snacks. Not an MD, but when I was a paramedic I was called to a home for a 14-year-old girl who I found standing over the toilet, and I noticed there was what looked like an umbilical cord going into the toilet. Upon further examination I discovered there was a newborn baby in the toilet. The child stated this newborn could not possibly be her baby as she was a virgin. Update. I should have said this before. The baby lived, and after I dropped baby and mom off at the hospital I don't know what happened. This is incredibly sad. Last month, a dad asked one of our OBs for an extra stitch during his wife's repair after delivery. Her immediate response was, "Exactly how small do you need it to be, sir?" Freaking legend on our unit. Now, spread this so it can become the standard response to this all too common statement. Not an OBGYN, but my OBGYN had the sex talk with me instead of my parents. They withdrew me from sex ed classes and made me show up to a counselor instead, promising they would teach sex ed on their own time. Anyway, the OBGYN said that anal sex is legitimate but that you can't get pregnant from it. She had met at least 8 couples in her lifetime. Age was late 40s, early 50s, where the couple was having fertility issues, and it was because the husband was using the wrong hole. I repeat, the husband was using the wrong hole. It was even more mortifying because these were very traditional couples, Asian, Indian, Christian, and they were horrified they were committing sodomy. So yeah, the conversations that woman must have had. I have to wonder how far down the list of questions and tests they get before they need to say, point on this photo what part you use, and, on this portion, describe what you do with that part and where you do it. Sister is a nurse in the mom-baby unit who will also work in labor and delivery. One dad asked for a C-section so her vagina wouldn't be ruined, or another dad asking for her to be stitched up extra tight after delivery. Bonus edit. Another dad that couldn't seem to keep his clothes on during their entire stay. The nurses had to have multiple conversations with him to keep his clothes on. He just kept stripping and walking around. Like he'd go out to the coffee station in the hall with only his whitey tighties on. And he'd be buck naked in the hospital room. We had to ask him to wear pants and a shirt when in the hall, and at a minimum pants in the hospital room. No, he was not trying to have sex with her. The husband stitch. Hate that it's even a thing. My dad is an OB-GYN. I asked him, he said he was delivering a baby and the father seemed extra nervous, which is to be expected, but my dad sensed something was off. Well, anyway, he delivers it, and as soon as it comes out the father yells, "It's mine, it is white." Then ran out of the room and told the family before my dad could say word. Needless to say, my dad did tell him that sometimes black children when born can look white, which led to a big argument and security having to be called. Reminds me of the story where the baby came out a bit dark and the husband went on and did about his wife cheating and had his whole family basically abuse her, only to find out that he was the one cheating and projected his guilt on her. What and but. Not quite what you are asking for, but when my wife was pregnant she fell down the stairs because our other child decided she wanted to jump out of mom's arms. Cue all the bruising and preterm labor. After that, appointments got really awkward. Nurses were short with me. I finally told my wife that I had a feeling the staff didn't like me and I figured I'd sit the next appointment out unless she really wanted me there. My wife said she noticed all of this and decided to ask a nurse what the deal was. Turns out the whole office just assumed I'm the one who pushed her down the stairs. I wasn't even home when it happened. That's when I found out that I apparently look like the type of guy who would push a pregnant woman down the stairs. Kudos to your wife for straight up asking what their deal was so that could be cleared up, lol. I did women's and infant nursing for 10 years. This wasn't the dad but rather the mom. 1 hour before change of shift, we get a cesarean admit. By this facility protocol we used an injectable opiate in her epidural to control pain. A common side effect is itching. Keep this in mind. Also, apologies for the cussing. I am speaking verbatim. Said patient was being wheeled on her bed to her room and the itches were hitting their peak during this transit. I receive her in the hallway and help wheel her into the room. get her comfortable and start prepping her chart. Not 2 minutes after I exit her room, commotion starts in there. She's screaming. I run in and assess the situation. Immediately she grabs my hand on the bedside and begs for the itch to stop. She's actively sitting up a no post-op so fast and scratching her nethers and her butt. OMG, help. Someone scratch it. The husband finally makes an arrival at this exact moment and says, scratch what honey, big mistake. I've never seen evil before, but this woman bout came unglued. She looked at him and dead to rights screamed, my butt, you dipshit. If you'd have unloaded there we wouldn't be in this mess. Now scratch my butt. We are trained to keep a poker face, but not one person could maintain it. Every single one of us. Family, patient, care tech, etc, except the dad died in giggles. Most of us crying from trying desperately to have a modicum of professionalism. Nope, it was 100% gone. Had to excuse myself to grab the IV Benadryl to send her into non-itchy bliss. Runner up, I'm also a trained lactation consultant. This means I'm an expert in helping new mothers breastfeed. One couple had an order for my assistance due to poor feeding for baby. I go in and meet them both, educate to what's about to happen, etc. This father is uber excited about his firstborn son. Extremely helpful and just bouncy energy. Well, I needed mom to express some milk for baby by hand and began to demonstrate said technique. I kid you not. Dad takes this exact opportunity to jump in and say, do you want me to help? I can get it started going by sucking it out. We do this all the time. Lem help. Cue mom's death glare. This is what I came here for. I worked in a diagnostic center. OB-GYN refers patient for a transvaginal ultrasound to find out why she is having fertility issues. Tech inserts probe. Woman flinches in pain. Tech asks if it hurts during intercourse. The woman explains the husband doesn't insert it in the vagina. No, here while pointing to her belly button. The tech came out red-faced. She had to call the doctor and explain why the patient was having trouble getting pregnant. This happened twice at this clinic. Twice. I think at that point we just kinda let nature take its course and perhaps not educate people on the workings of intercourses to avoid producing more belly button suckers. I know it sounds harsh to rob folks of the pleasures of sex, but dang man, I fear for their children. Dad is a 30+ OB-GYN, now retired. He tells a story of a hyper-religious couple, Muslim, who came in about difficulty getting pregnant. He examined the woman alone and discovered that she was actually a removed accidental slur. Sorry, intersex, male gonads, understanded, no uterus, normal vulva vagina. The woman was mortified to learn this at 18. She feared her husband would be violent, believing he had been being gay by having sex with her. My dad gave her the option to call the police or ask for help. He and the nurses gave her phone numbers for counseling and offered discretion when talking to the spouse. She declined everything and asked that they tell the husband together. The man was super upset, and they eventually left the office both in tears. Dad never saw her again and wonders what happened. Not a physician, but one of the OB-GYN docs I work with told me about a couple who came in for infertility counseling. She was asking them about the length of her cycle, lifestyle, etc and came to find out that they weren't penetrating during intercourse. A fertility specialist told us during his lecture that his favorite was a couple where the woman took birth control the entire time they were trying to conceive. All my friends got pregnant on it, so I thought it might help. Also, there was a couple who had sex up to 80 times a week. Dude was probably shooting blanks at that rate. On my OB rotation, husband said holy crap as the baby ground, wiggled, passed out and hit his head on the bedside table on his way down, and had to be admitted to the same hospital his wife was having the baby at. She ended up getting discharged before he did. I can totally see this. Hysterical. Back in my OB rotation in med school, we had a pregnant woman who was super morbidly obese with a BMI in the 70s. During her first prenatal visit, the resident was asking about her pregnancy history, past difficulty with fertility and conception, problems with the pregnancy so far, etc. Pretty standard stuff as far as I understood at the time. Husband then chimed in about the conception. Turns out they had no trouble conceiving. He then went into detail about how the conception went and blew my little inexperienced mind. Basically, the wife's mother and sister had to help with conception by holding the wife's thighs out of the way enough that he could get in to do the job. I still don't have words. I used to be an L&D nurse. I've heard a similar story from a patient, except in their case it was friends from church. I have friends, but I don't have friends like that. We had a father bring his PS4 to a delivery room so he could play Spider-Man while his wife got induced. Another guy was found to be cheating when his wife was postpartum and went to use his phone to take pics of the baby. Whoops. Not an OBGYN here. My ex-boyfriend was adamantly against me using tampons, cups, discs or anything that had to be inserted. He told me it would change the shape of my vagina. He believed that after a certain amount of time together, my vagina would change to his shape so we would be a perfect fit. That and me using supers or ultra tampons would mean I would need a girthier man. Because, you know, a wad of cotton would stretch me out like crazy. So my question is, does that perfect fit scenario also apply to the 11 other women he was boning on the side? No, just me, or I must be special. Not an OB-GYN but a nurse. And not anything a husband or boyfriend said, but still an interesting story. I once took care of a patient who had a baby as a virgin. She was a very religious woman who was saving her virginity for marriage. She told me she never met the right man and she was ready to have a baby as she was getting older. She was in her early 40s. So she had IVF done and had a baby while also being a virgin. Good for her. She knew what she wanted, and instead of settling in an unhappy marriage, she took matters into her own hands. My dad is a doctor and his friend was a OB-GYN and was telling my dad a time when a couple came into his office and they were having difficulty having a child. They were trying for over a year to have a child but the wife never got pregnant. Found out that the man and the woman came up in very strict upbringing and the man was never putting his penis inside her. He was basically rubbing his penis on top of her vagina and would ejaculate across her belly. Then he would take his finger and smear his semen all over the top of her vagina. My dad's friend had to explain sex to the both of them and tell them what to do and how to do it. Was an awkward conversation. I just kept thinking, did they not ever watch P or have that talk with their parents? Have they never seen stuff related to sex ever? Was just a crazy story. I wonder if they ever figured it out and actually eventually had kids or not. My friend told me that her OBGYN friend told her that apparently a significant number of people try to get pregnant by anal. Proper sex education matters. People. Not the husband. But during my OB rotation the wife asked if her husband could still go down on her. This was a day after a hysterectomy. Her 15-year-old son was also in the room. I was saving this unhair juice for something else, but I think this son needs them more than me. I am no an OB-GYN, but I do have a friend that is. One of her more recent crazy comments was a guy who thought that giving birth gave women massive orgasms. He genuinely believed that was how they pushed the baby out, and that it felt great. I wish. Not an OB, but apparently my dad asked my mom's doctor when she was in labor how long it would take me to open my eyes. Like puppies, kittens. I have so many. Dad was busy taking selfies to post on IG that he was having a baby, while his wife was on the other side of the room giving birth. When asked if he wanted to help, he declined and said she got it. Not a OB-GYN, but a med student. In one of my rotations, I had an encounter with a father who wanted us to make her wife only reproducing male child by some drugs or procedure. Our head used to tell us that I can tell the sex of the baby only by seeing the expressions of fathers and relatives in the clinical rounds. You all are allowed to guess my country. India. My doctor told me a story about a baby he delivered. It was the couple's 6th and they were very observant Orthodox Jews, so when she called at 11 PM on Shabbos that labor has started, the husband couldn't drive them to the hospital himself. Although the doctor understood, he tried to help them understand how emergent the situation was. BC the delivery was going to be so fast. The doctor races to the hospital and waits. He waits 30 minutes, an hour. He's pacing the drop-off. Finally, 90 minutes later, a taxi screeches into the parking lot at Pike 2 AM. The doctor opens her door to see the baby crowning and the woman yelling and the driver yelling. The husband throws open his door and just sprints off into the parking lot yelling, does a full loop while the baby is born and runs up as the nurses are wrapping the baby and getting mom and baby into a wheelchair. Doctor, what happened? Where did you go? Dad, I just didn't know what to do. Poor guy was so hopped up on adrenaline he just took off, haha. My mom taught labor and delivery. If the baby won't fit, it's too late for a C-section. You break the baby's shoulder so it can fur through. One of her students asked why they don't break the mom's hip instead. Not an obstetrician, but I used to work in neonates, i.e. the doctor that immediately checks baby over once they are born, makes sure they are breathing etc, and deliveries that haven't gone so smoothly. I'd be there for a lot of C-sections and once had a first time dad who was so excited he was running around and tripping over things and getting shouted at by all the theater staff. Kept trying to take photos of everything, which was cute. But you gotta let me do my thing and make sure baby is healthy and breathing consistently before I'm good to hand him or her over to mum and dad. I just imagined him like a Labrador retriever. Hope you forgive me for the switch around, but when my GF had given birth to our son at home, it was about 8 at night. The two midwives had been there since before dinner time. So when our son was born and we were all talking about how everything went well and our son was cuddling up to my GF in bed, I asked if I should order pizza for us all. I reckoned they were pretty hungry. I sure was. Their dry answer was that was the first time they were ever asked that. And no, they didn't want pizza. So no pizzerino for new dad or Ino either. After labor, I would have given my left arm for fresh pizza delivery. Delivery is a marathon and I was famished afterward. Sorry they were lame. Not a mind-blowing thing that was said, but still kinda funny. When I was in medical school, I did my OB rotation on the high-risk area. Medical students were generally scared of this area, so I was the only student with an awesome attending and got to do a lot. We called the attending on this service a random thought generator. If he thought of something, he would say or act on it. We had one patient that showed up on our service in active labor. She had a very uneventful pregnancy and we couldn't figure out how she was on our service. But, hey, we'll take a normal patient. She arrived with perfect makeup, perfect hair, and she had the perfect epidural and was in no pain or distress. The attending looked at me and said that I'd be doing this delivery. Okay, I thought, no problem. Then he looked at the father and said, "Number, you'll deliver this one." The father got wide-eyed and the mother started laughing. He's an air traffic controller. I've never seen him panic before. The nurse took him to the sink, gave him a scrub brush and had him start washing his hands. We turned back to the mom. Okay, push 1, 2, 3, 10. Relax. We looked at the dad and he's still washing that same finger he started with. Okay, that's good enough. A delivery is by no means sterile. Put this and this on. Our attending didn't put women in stirrups, but would instead deliver straight onto the bed. He sat the dad on the bed with him on one side and me on the other side, and the dad delivered his own healthy child. Not a doctor, but when I was pregnant with my first and only child, my ex-husband was an embarrassment. During the labor and delivery class he was on his phone most of the time, to the point I fell down when I was supposed to be balancing on a ball. When asked how he felt about the baby, he stated, "I'm not making a big deal out of it," shrugged and went back to playing on his phone. The other couples in the class came up to me during the break to ask if I was doing okay, and even the instructor voiced her concern with me privately. I had to have an emergency C-section and he just fell asleep. The nurse woke him up by screaming at him that I was going into the operating room. He didn't want to hold our son. He didn't want to change diapers. He would scream at our 2-day-old son for crying and get mad at me for not getting up and doing anything. The nurses kicked him out and 3 of them gave me names for divorce lawyers, one of which I eventually used. The kicker: my ex begged me for a kid because all he wanted was to be a dad. I was on the fence on having kids. 2 years before my son was born, he told my mom that he was going to divorce me if we didn't have a child. Update: wow, I honestly didn't think this comment would get this much attention. Thank you for the awards and all the nice comments. To answer some questions that I saw. 1. Before my son, he was an okay husband. When we first met he was amazing, but now that I look back, I could see he just wanted a live-in caretaker. Hindsight is always 20/20. He was a bit addicted to video games, but for the most part we got on decently. The video game addiction just got so much worse after my son was born and he began prioritizing them over me and our son. Just one of the many reasons I left. 2. Yes, he still has contact with my son. He pushed for 50/50 custody so he wouldn't have to pay child support, which he got and neither of us owe child support. Now my son only sees him on weekends if that. I'm working with a lawyer to get child support from him. 3. My son is great. He started kindergarten last year and is excelling in math and reading. He's been on the honor roll every quarter. He's turning 6 in a few months and, while motherhood is difficult especially while working full time, I love him more than anything in this world. He's taught me a lot about myself and brought so much joy to my life. I can't wait till it's safe to go to Disneyland again because I'm taking him for a week. He wanted the title of dad but not the responsibilities that comes with it. I'm so sorry this happened to you, but I'm glad you kicked him out of your life. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.